based in Chattanooga. A little over a year ago, it was remissioned with new leadership and new board of directors to try to help figure out how Chattanoogans broadly, meaning all of us, can better benefit from the incredible digital assets that our city has. So it focuses on several things in that first year, one being creation of the Innovation District, which is 140 acres in this portion of the city. This building is almost in the center of it. It's got the primary concentration of sort of Innovation District assets. Another has to do with applications and research, and another focus has to do with trying to help close the digital divide. So it's great to have you in this building. This is the Edney Innovation Center. The Enterprise Center offices are in this building, as well as CoLab on the first floor, which you probably know about already. Society of Work, which many of you already know about, maybe are members of, is also in the building. They're having a floor redone, but in the meantime, they've moved from the bank building into this space. So that gives you a little bit of a flavor of what we're trying to have happen in this space. And the fact that ChadEv is here every week is just emblematic of that. So the plan today, and I know that your goal is to try to get you on your way by 1 o'clock. The panelists will be able to stay for a few minutes after that for more private conversation, but if you need to leave before all of this is stopped up here, please do what you need to do, but we'll be around for a few more minutes to talk. I don't think the AARP folks head to their next session until about 1:30. So I'm going to introduce our panelists. I'll start with Dorothy, who's with AARP, and she's going to sort of set the stage for the rest of the conversation that we hope to have in this hour. But I'll introduce everybody, and then Dorothy will do that. And then we've just got some questions we're going to ask the panelists. And those of you in the audience that have some perspectives on the questions, please feel free to jump in there, and we should have time for questions from the audience too. So Dorothy Simons is with AARP. She is a Vice President of Policy Integration. She's responsible for the oversight of AARP public policies that address issues facing older Americans. Leslie Jensen Inman, to my left, is the co-founder of Center in downtown Chattanooga, which is a user experience design school in its first full year now, second full year?
We're actually, it just depends on how you look at it.
Okay,
We're actually still accepting student applications.
Okay, great. She is a designer herself, a speaker, an author, and an educator, primarily at the college level. Stuart Dickerson, on her left, is with Unum in Chattanooga. He's a senior software developer and a Microsoft certified application developer. He is on the Chattanooga Technology Council, and in what little spare time any of that would afford him, he spends some of it with high school kids, helping them get better connected to technology and education. So Dorothy, would you like to sort of set the stage for the broader discussion?
Let me first say, my role at AARP is really policy. So there are a huge amount of work going on at AARP that is directed at technology. And so I'm pinch hitting a little bit for someone who could not be here. So AARP has 38 million members. So we have an incredibly large membership base. And we do lobbying, we provide products and services, we do education and information. So there's a whole range of activity that AARP is doing in legislatures and in the communities across the country to strengthen communities through, we advocate on healthcare, housing, a whole range of economic issues, job opportunities, all of that. What we're excited about to be here today, and we have 7 or 8, is it 8? 7 of our National Policy Council members, and this is an advisory board to our board of directors who really are volunteers who give their time to help develop policy within the organization to try to drive what we're trying to do in our priorities. So they're here to listen and learn. It's very exciting to hear what's going on in Chattanooga. And one thing we want to get across to you all, we're here to learn from you a lot, but we also want to convey a couple of messages. When you think about older people, you don't necessarily think about technology. So we need to overcome that myth. About 70% of people over the age of 50 are online. And we want to move that needle even further, and we want to get more and more of our membership engaged online. And to do that, there is a portion of folks over 50 who need a little bit more support in getting online initially, or in really engaging in sort of the app world, or the new functions that are really coming out all the time. So one of our pitches is to really try and get communities that are doing development, whether it's software development or a whole range of technology development going forward, to think about the older population. And we like to talk about design for all. You can target the older population and say, we're going to have this work for that particular group. But what we want to push is design for all. That if usability is really transparent and fluid, everybody can use it. And really, we want to help older people be part of that full community that's using it. It doesn't have to be designed for older people. It can be designed for everybody. And as the interface with these different technologies gets easier and easier, that's going to work for everybody. So that's in everybody's interest to do that. The other thing AARP has is a tech program where we really try to bring older people together to try to get more and more sophistication online, more and more capacity online. So we're out in communities doing that because we believe, and we heard in an earlier panel, that really internet access and the ability to function is going to be necessary for everybody very shortly. Whether you're trying to engage with the government, whether you're trying to engage with the private sector to buy things. So we feel like our population, we want to make sure people really understand that it's really a myth that older people aren't interested in this, and it's really a myth that we can't bring this entire population along into this really exciting experience that you have. So with that, I'll turn it back to Anne.
Okay, great, thanks. First question, and any of the panelists can jump in there. They had them before, so there's nothing tricky about the questions. What's currently working, and where do barriers still remain to full-scale technology adoption among older adults?
I think what's currently working are things like this, right? Having conversations, acknowledging that we do need to make applications, software, websites, all kinds of technology. I will stay very still, or try to. All kinds of technology really accessible to all people. And what's the barrier, I think Dorothy pointed it out, is there's a lot of assumptions made about different groups of people. Whether it's a group of people based on age or based on any other factor, we tend to make assumptions. And those assumptions, we need to challenge each other on those assumptions. We need to challenge ourselves with those assumptions and really work towards understanding for what each group is really looking for. Because I have parents that are a bit older, and they do engage with technology in a way that probably surprises people. And I've talked with different friends and colleagues, and maybe their parents don't get online, but my mom is a whiz on certain things, and she doesn't want it to be like specifically, I think, done for a certain kind of like demographic, including her age. She just wants to be able to use it, just like anybody else would want to be able to use it. And so I think those are the kind of things that we really need to look into.
Yeah, so I look at technologies for older people as technologies that enable them, or technologies that are going to help them maintain their quality of life, and they're two different categories. These enabling technologies have been pretty successful. If you look at like tablet sales, older people are the largest purchasers of tablets, and it's a great technology. It's pretty foolproof. Monitoring tools, there's so many things that are coming out every day that help people live independently for a much longer period of time. I think one of the biggest barriers, though, for people is around education. There simply needs to be more efforts placed in helping people who either have left the workforce or are beyond working age to have access to that education, or to have access to people to help them learn how to utilize technology in a way that's both enabling and also in a way that's secure and effective.
I would echo that the tablet use is very high among the 50 plus, and I think, as I've said, lots of folks are online doing good things. The barriers, though, are really that education and support, and for folks who need some kind of introduction to it and getting them online, it can be very labor intensive. We have a tech program that's trying to reach out to the older population that does need education and support to do this, but I have to be honest, it really does take time and effort to do that. So we need to be creative about thinking about partnerships with younger people. We talk a lot about intergenerational partnerships where we might have older people coming into the schools to do certain things that can help young people. We have an Experience Corps program where we have older people coming in to elementary schools, but what we'd like to see built out on that kind of program is to have older people who are coming into the schools gain the capacity or the advantage there to learn about technology when they're there. Because I do think the myths are great for individuals and communities about who can learn, who's interested, who wants to do this, and we need to break through that, but also find creative ways to do that that aren't labor intensive and so expensive. So I think those are some of the challenges in trying to get as many people up to speed on this as we can.
Just to add to that, we need education around the people that are educating. For example, my mom had a really interesting experience. She went to get some help, and it was great. It was through our local library, and they have a whole group of folks that will help older people, get through the challenges of like even just posting something on Craigslist or working through a PowerPoint presentation. They kind of just meet you where you are. But if we're not really careful and we forget to educate the educators, they might not realize that coming in and changing all the browser settings for an older person is disconcerting. Heck, if that happened to me, I would be disconcerted, right? My entire workflow. So we just have to remind ourselves to educate all the people involved in that education experience.
Well, and really keep the collaboration open. I have 2 children, so I'm pretty tech savvy. I wouldn't consider myself, super tech savvy, but I'm pretty proficient on a lot of things, but they're so much far ahead of me. So when they give me a hard time, I just laugh and keep going. You may get there sooner, but I'm going to still get there. But there are other folks that deters them. It's sort of like, oh, this is too far ahead of me. I can't get there. We need to get that message out. You can all get there. This is moving rapidly for everybody. I talk to 30-year-olds who talk about their schooling experience and say, wow, we didn't have a tablet in every room and we didn't have all of this. So it's moving so rapidly for everyone. We need to remove the concept or really try to challenge the concept that age is the problem. Age isn't the problem, it's the rapidity of change, and we're all facing it. We're all trying to keep up with it. Doesn't matter how old you are, we're all chasing the moving target that keeps going faster.
What kind of elements do designers and programmers build in to applications, websites, and so forth for a 55 plus age range?
So these can be not just for 55 plus, but really to make different applications, to make the software, to make websites very accessible, meaning that it is accessible to all people with different kinds of challenges that they face. So, 55 plus, I feel it in my late 30s even, my eyesight has definitely started changing, right? So all of a sudden font sizes seem very different to me now in contrast, color contrast. I've mentioned my mom a couple times. She's here in the audience today, which is kind of cool. But she once told me, she's like, I know a 20-year-old made this website because it's, and you have to understand, she's coming from the print world with me before the web stuff. So she was like, this is like 8-point type with no color contrast, and there's stuff moving, and I can't see any of this. Now, she's been a great mom. She's had to listen to this kind of stuff since I was early teens, so she knows the words, but it was so frustrating. And I looked at the site, and it was frustrating for me to be able to try to read and to retain the information, to get through the experience. And so I think as designers specifically, we really need to consider what makes a really great, delightful user experience. Is that when we're talking about tablets, is that making sure that the button size is big enough so that it's easy to, click with your finger? Is it making sure that the color contrast is right and the font size is right, or the font size is adjustable, right? I don't know about you, but sometimes by the end of the day, I'm reading on my iPad and I want the type size very large because my eyes are tired from an entire day of work. And just giving more power and more control to the user, even if it's not the ideal design that we had in mind, if it's getting the user the information that they need and they're enjoying the experience, that's the right design.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest disappointments I see in the evolution of technology, especially mobile technology, has been how poorly designed smartphones have been for older people. It's just really disappointing. I hope an organization like AARP could start using some of its policy to try to help influence the hardware makers of these devices. Apple is as guilty as any of them, to provide an interface that's more acceptable and open to people that do have not just disabilities, but their vision is starting to fade. Hearing is an issue. All the motor skills that you have, these devices just don't work very well for a lot of that population.
And I would echo that. I think what we want to see is, as I said, design for all. And for all, I mean that in a very inclusive term. So if the functionality of a device can really be manipulated by the consumer in a way that you can change the volume, that you can change the font size, that you can change how you hold the settings, or whatever attribute of that is, if it can be customized to your function. And that's not an age question, because lots of people under the age of 50 have functional limitations of one kind or another. So what we want to see is the user being able to change that functionality based on the limits or not of their function. And I think the producers of all this technology, there are bright, creative minds, certainly smarter than mine, that can get after this and figure out a way to really put that capacity into the user's hands. That if you need to change something, whatever that is, that capacity is built into that device. And the other thing we've been talking about a lot is trying to partner with industries up front to build in these kinds of privacy, security protections right from the front. Because what we are hearing is the regulators can't keep up with the kind of concerns that emerge. People put out all kinds of new things, new disruptive technologies, and the problems that emerge are seen on the back end. And it's too late on the back end. So we need to have as many upfront conversations and as many iterations as possible when creative folks are coming up with this, to talk about building in these kinds of concerns and protections from the beginning. So that's a big piece of what we're trying to get out and do more of.
Any of you programmers, designers in the audience have more thoughts about that?
In their website. There's actually a whole set of rules for making web interfaces that are useful to people who are just a little bit sight impaired to all the way to legally blind. And most web designers don't use them because they want to tweak the font and use light gray on white. And let's completely redesign the user interface and put the buttons on the top and the bottom and all that. And my point is, these rules already exist. There are wide standards for using them, and they're generally ignored because the designers want to make something pretty. That's my rant.
Yeah.
I think that
Any other rants out there, or responses to the rant, or other elements that you may think of or found yourself thinking of when it comes to 55 and over?
I probably am the one that you guys are targeting, age 75. I wanted to comment from the AARP side of this thing. I guess Apple's got 275,000 applications out there. God knows how many Microsoft has got. I think that each of these new technologies comes along, it starts creating its own applications. And frankly, those of us at our age are buried in this stuff. What we need is somewhere to go to find those applications that might make sense for us, and among those applications, which ones we should be looking at. Case in point, try to go out and find the needed information on senior living centers in the United States. That's something we're all going to encounter at one point or other in our life. You go out there and look at these things, and they're all marketing. There's nothing out there that says this is how much this is going to cost, this is what its annual dues are going to be, these are the exact services you're going to get, and here's how you get into that particular program. AARP needs to have a page in that magazine that you guys put out, which says specifically, here are the sites that are available, here's how we rank them, and here's the ones that you need to be looking at. And that can be done for hundreds of applications. I'd suggest staying away from social media. The last thing I need is to have 50 or 60 more hits an hour. What I really want is simply the data, and I'll figure out how to work it out.
And your point is that you want to see the data in a recommended app. Yeah, you want the screening of the apps.
I want to just say that you're not the only one feeling overwhelmed by applications, and I think all of us in whatever field we're in, whatever age group, are probably feeling that inundation, and it's very overwhelming. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for people that are creating applications right now. If you listen to some of these pain points, there's huge opportunities not only for AARP but also for different folks in this room to find ways to create applications or create something that can aggregate the content in a very useful way. And that would be great in just a human-to-human way, but there's also business models here. But this is, we have a large growing population that needs to be served, and there might be some very creative ways to make sure they're getting what they need, and also you're being able to build a successful, sustainable business model. So those are some things to consider.
Yeah, I would just echo, we are aware that folks are not using apps as much. People are online, but they are overwhelmed by the apps. So I hear your point about a useful next step is to try and do some kind of sifting through that and aggregating. The other, I want to respond to the earlier rant because I think it was a good one. But I want to just put out a challenge so AARP has really put out challenges to try to get design folks and creators to come up with creative ways to do this. And my answer to your rant is it's a harder problem to crack, that's for sure. But whatever group comes in there and makes it pretty and compliant with that functionality is a partner we'd be really interested in and could have really a very good business model to go forward in terms of trying to make things that are, we all want pretty things in our lives or well-designed things that look good, but if they also have that functionality built in, I think that's a business model worth chasing.
I'd like to go back and make some comments specifically to our web developers and designers in the audience. There's kind of 3 areas you need to think about when you're thinking about a website that's going to be used by somebody who's older. The first one is think about vision and hearing. Those are just 2 physical traits that people decline in as they get older, including myself. And it's been brought up. The obvious thing is just the text is very important. So making sure that you have those larger font size, or you give the user the ability to increase that font size so that they can easily distinguish what they're reading. Another important area is around the use of color. Color can be another factor. Especially with certain shades of blue as people get older. And then finally hearing, there are screen readers out there that people depend on, and so you need to make sure that you test your websites using a screen reader. Another area to think about is motor control. We take for granted the use of a pointing device like a mouse, but the use of a pointing device can actually become more difficult as you get older, where tapping may be more accurate. So if you are going to have features that require tapping or pointing, make sure that the places on your page that receive that are large enough so that it's easier to aim that mouse and hit that. And then finally, the last thing is on memory and cognition. Make sure that as you're designing, if you're going to have like a really complex transaction, try to get it done in as small a real estate as possible. I mean, when I say that, don't make it 7 screens deep where you have to remember what you put on the second screen. Do simple things like back, next buttons and try to make your navigation very simple. And the other thing is, don't introduce change for the sake of change. If you do have a loyal customer base on your website that's older, try to limit the change or introduce the change slowly and not just quickly.
I think that's great advice.
Yeah, that was a great list. Anybody have anything to add to that?
I've worked with a large number of development groups, programming groups, and whatnot, and I find that the biggest problems come from teams that don't have a user experience person, whereas like the designer will just design it out, that's that, and they might not even have communication with the development team themselves, so it just kind of gets handed off, and then the coder's job's to code it, and then it's done with. Whereas if we incorporate during our design process, we've been going over, some UX research for these types of things beforehand, and it just solves problems all like from the get-go. And I think if more people would do that in their development process, then it would solve a lot of the problem.
Comment?
Yeah, and to add to that, as you are designing, especially something that's going to be publicly accessible or accessible to a certain market, you need to be getting feedback from all of your users, not just limited users. And so companies really need to invest more in getting that feedback and taking that feedback and putting it back into their product design.
To build off what you're saying, that's something that as a school for user experience designers, we actually, it's not surprising, we feel very strongly that that's a pretty true statement. I think what we need to really make sure is that the UX designers that we're creating for the future, the next generation of UX designers, the next generation of designers, the next generation of developers, that they really understand these challenges, that they are taught to look at them. They're working on real world projects. Maybe they're partnering with AARP to help figure out, how can we solve these challenges for different groups of people. These are the kind of things we need to make sure that we're educating the people that are going to be creating the next apps, the next websites, the next software, whatever the rest of us are going to be using. We need to educate them so well. And we need to think about having really mixed teams. We talk about diversity a lot, especially in the tech field. And a lot of times I think we see diversity as a race or a gender thing, right? But we're forgetting that diverse groups are really strong, and they're really strong when they're diverse in age too. To have a 22-year-old and a 62-year-old working on a project together, you're going to have them thinking about different kinds of experiences in different ways, and those conversations that they can have and the applications, the software, everything that they're creating can be so much more rich because they're coming at it with different kinds of views and life experiences. So I think when we talk about diversity, we really need to think about age as well and mixing our teams up, and let's not just have a whole bunch of one type of person working on projects. So let's have more diverse teams, and we're going to have better user experiences.
I think that's a great point, and I just would echo, we often get out there and talk about AARP, wanting to really communicate to folks that the older population is both an asset and an opportunity. And the asset side of it is what you're talking about, that if you partner with older people and you bring them into the process, they're your end user, and if that's your end user, bring them in talk about the kinds of things, because I think you will hear the vision issues, the hearing issues, the things that older people want to engage with, what they're interested in. If that's your targeted audience that you're trying to reach, bringing them in and using them as an asset is really important. And then more broadly, I can't say enough, it's a huge population to serve. So if you're interested in reaching a lot of people, it is worth your while to do that.
Yeah, we may all be a lot of different things, but we are all getting older.
That is correct.
And I want to just add on to what Dorothy has said, but I want to make sure that everybody understands that we have baby boomer population that's aging. And they have a lot of disposable income. And there's an economic reason to do the things that we've been talking about. So these young people that are sitting here thinking about this, there's money to be made there, because there are people that are willing to pay for this so that they can live in place. So look at the economic side of it too. It isn't just charity work here for old people.
My code for that was opportunity. So when I say opportunity, I mean exactly what Dennis is saying.
Any more comments about that from the group relative to what some of those opportunities may be? Okay, he's coming with a microphone.
In relation to your buttons and design, one thing that I've noticed with the older generation is when you have buttons close together, some people have fat fingers and they hit 2 or 3, or they're trying to submit and they hit the back button, or they're trying to do something else and then they close it out. So spacing is key with a lot of applications.
Comment. Well, Dorothy, this question is kind of directed to AARP folks in the audience, but there'll be other ideas as well that we need to hear. What are a few of the pain points for AARP as an organization, but also for their membership, that technology could possibly help with?
So I'll give it a shot to do an overview, but I'll invite the National Policy Council members to add to it and improve what I say. So let me give a shot at a couple of them. So we worry about access to broadband. There's no question about that. Just making sure everybody has access to do this is an important issue for us. We talked a little bit about it in the session we had earlier about affordability and looking for ways to support either subsidization or ways to do that. We really believe that this is something that everybody has to have access to. So that's one piece. We really are committed to supporting folks getting tech savvy, and to do that we have to provide some education and support at times, and that tends to be pretty labor intensive. So finding a way to bring that to scale and do that in a way that is affordable is a challenge. You know, we can have programs out there that bring volunteers together. We can try and do that. We can do some intergenerational programming. But there is a little bit of challenge there with the affordability and bringing that to a broader scale that needs to happen. The other piece is people really want to stay in their homes. It's sort of old hat for us who are around AARP that the majority of people want to stay in their homes as they age. They do not, as their mobility or other restrictions come, they do not want to move to other places, whether it's an assisted living facility or institutional living. They want to stay in their homes as long as possible. So if technology aimed at keeping people in their homes can enhance that, I know we had a little bit of touch base on the monitoring and all of that. There are a range of issues. AARP has lots of resources if you're interested in focusing on this, about what empowers people to stay in their homes and keeps them there. And so that is... I don't know if someone didn't like my answer. Was I just getting buzzed?
Use the word empowerment.
It's got a jolt.
Buzzword.
So staying in their homes is just a focus I cannot overemphasize. It is really what our membership wants, what older people want, and focusing technology to allow that to happen in whatever range of ways that is, whether it's monitoring someone's health, helping them just do basic tasks like keeping their home up. How can technology come in and do that in an assistive way or help in some way? It is worth exploring. So let me open that up to my colleagues who can improve what I say. So I see Lynn back there, and then we'll go to you, Dennis.
I'm Lynn Young. I'm from Idaho, and I'm also on the National Policy Council. And as many of you know, Idaho is a rural state. And so while we have AARP members and other older Americans, wanting to stay in their home and age in place. Another issue that we worry about is isolation when they don't have the means, particularly in rural areas, to get out of their home into places. So my hope is that through the use of technology, they can stay engaged in their community in things like, it could be things as simple as distance learning, but also engaging with other people, playing card games, playing other things online with one another to feel connected and also to stimulate brain health. So that's another thing I hope that we can all take a look at and see what options are out there and maybe what ones might be created.
Let me give you a specific example of something I think that is missing. One of the passions I've had working with AARP National Policy Council is transportation, so that people can live in home and still get to the shopping and pick up their prescriptions and get health care. But one of the projects that I am working on right now in rural South Dakota is to have the doctors coordinate with our transportation system the scheduling of appointments. And this is something that is very foreign to the doctors. There's nothing out there. This is a new experiment and an application that would allow a central place where appointments could be made and coordinate with the transportation system so the transportation system can be more efficient. And you have to realize that the transportation is probably covering a 300 to 400 mile radius in a very rural area where you can't send a bus out and pick up one person. If it can be coordinated so that several patients can be picked up and returned with on the same trip, it would be huge. There's nothing out there.
So you talked a lot about opportunity.
Hey, Stuart, the voice from, the loud squelch was mic dying, and I think you're probably mic 1. So let me
That's what
give
it
you
sounds
this.
like when a mic dies.
Yeah.
No, it's not pretty.
Sorry.
Not pretty.
All right, I'm
I think they'd go quiet.
Okay, so we were talking about opportunities, and one of the great things about our city, Chattanooga, is it does have a great entrepreneurial spirit. That's why we're in a facility like this, and I would just like to challenge all technologists in the city to, think about these great ideas, because there's so many opportunities. You mentioned one, enabling people and helping people maintain their independence. There's other opportunities like, virtual physician exams, things like that don't just require transportation. Robotics, somebody mentioned that. Robotics is a huge, huge way that people can have tasks done for them that they're not able to do for themselves. So I challenge each of you out there in our development community to be thinking about these ideas and take advantage of them, and maybe it'll be a great opportunity for you as well.
Yeah, and I hope you'll take advantage of reading what's on your chairs. There's a document called What's Your 50-Plus Strategy, a new investment theme, and that does a much better job. That's the person who was supposed to be sitting in this chair today talking to you. He focuses on this, that's his entire job, is to go out into the communities that are doing startups and all of this and really talk about what is your 50-plus strategy. Here's what older people care about, and in the back of that article is a whole range of health. It's mostly health-related things, but Jody has written, his name is Jody Holtzman, he's written on some other things besides health, but it talks about aging with vitality, nutrition, medication management, a whole range of things that on the health side they're struggling with that we really could use some focus and new creative thinking around that. So I hope you'll take advantage of reading that. The other thing I want to emphasize, because we're here with the National Policy Council, is we worry a lot about consumer protections. We worry a lot about whatever you're creating, that interchange, whatever the user is getting, that they understand there's transparency, there's choice, there's an understanding of the privacy protections. there's an understanding of what really those terms and conditions are and all of that. So I can't emphasize enough, as much as AARP wants to move itself in the direction of getting people online, we also have our heart in this very core place of consumer protection. So I encourage you to think about, in the long run, businesses that treat consumers well, that really do give them straightforward information, are transparent about what the deal is, are clear about what their data is going to be used for. People worry about that, certainly older people. You know, I don't know if you've experienced, I hit terms and condition, and I'm a lawyer by training. I always read them, or I try to, and boy, they are complicated, and I think, who the heck is understanding these? Simplifying your terms and conditions, simplifying all of that as a business practice will distinguish you from the pack. And I can't say that enough. One of the things we really want to push is giving that consumer not only a great user experience, but really consumer protection built right in. So I hope that gets you thinking about that.
Well, Dorothy, that's, I was going to say a lot of the same things, because my name is Ann Norton. I'm on the National Policy Council for AARP, and I'm from Colorado. But along with that, it sure would be nice, and I know there's lots of manuals out there, there's lots of, you know, Internet for Dummies, but if there was a simple, concise, easily accessible way to understand how to navigate the web and all of the changes, and I don't know if I'm making any sense, but a simple way for all of us to keep to know to keep up with the changes, so that we know what's happening. For, you know, if we use Gmail, you know, why are we then getting all of these little pop-up ads? Or you guys know all of the technical terms. I don't, but I'm finding it increasingly difficult to understand how all of this works. And I think that's because I think there's a difference between being tech savvy and being able to use the devices that we have. And I think there's a real need and a real desire for people to become, some of us, to become more tech savvy, to understand this world in a more comprehensible way.
Leslie, did you want to?
Question right here.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm not very tech savvy, obviously, but one of the things that I truly believe in is that when we do something like making an app and doing things on the web, we need to take into consideration learning styles. And very often, people in their 70s have a more, I have a more social approach to learning than a computer geek in their 20s. They do things differently than I do, and they have different learning styles. And I think that we forget that and don't play into those styles. And maybe we should even catalog some of those apps by learning styles. So when you're aware of your learning style, then you don't have to go for 1,000 different apps. You can go to the ones that go with your brand of learning.
I see there's a question over here.
I'm hiking over.
Yeah, Bob Pratt, and I'm from California on the National Policy Council, and we've had the privilege of having one of our executive council members and also spending some time at your contemporaries at the Center of Technology and Aging at Berkeley, and they're doing the same thing that you are. They're going to make a fortune on the apps that they developed. All you have to do is go down to their Qualcomm cafeteria down there, and they will show you apps under development that they have that they're going to be able to retire on, and I believe some of them will. But one of the things that they have found through their research with seniors especially is, we talked about the interface. They're looking at the primary interface as tablet size versus the smartphone, and that's where the market is right now with the senior population primarily is in the tablet, the small tablets. And the verbal interface. I noticed, like, even on my phone, I think the new Android version, you can just say brighter, and it gets brighter. You can give it verbal, you can give your phone verbal commands to do various things. So the apps that they're developing are able to be updated to the new technology and use verbal responses in many cases when they're developing apps for seniors. And so the interface is one thing that they're looking at when they develop stuff for seniors. And most of the great stuff is not coming from the graduate students or the companies. They're looking, Apple and Google, they don't do raw technology anymore. They buy it and make it marketable and make money out of it. So they're buying raw technology from these students in some cases. And so, but there's a huge market in this, and it generates around a lot of stuff that's that's already in the brochure you mentioned, Dorothy, which is medication management. Apps that make it very easy to make sure that because seniors tend to be on more meds, to keep up to date with their for our caregivers, to make sure that anybody you're concerned about is taking their apps. And then for communication, the two things that the seniors use, of course, that really attracts them to, and we're doing a big event when I get back, an outreach to seniors, usually is called Senior Connect. But Skype and FaceTime are big deals now. It's so easy to make a FaceTime appointment that all the senior has to do is tap the phone through their Facebook account, and you're online with them with a FaceTime appointment. So what's attractive to really seniors and gets them involved in it is Skype and things like FaceTime, where they can communicate with their grandkids and their family, and that's the big initial attraction.
What I'm hearing, there's this common theme. If we start figuring out what people are really interested in doing, and then meeting them where they are and helping them learn in the ways that they feel most comfortable, we're going to have the best success with whatever we're creating. So it's just some things to for all of us to keep in mind.
Yeah, and I think, the material we put out, it does put out a lot of the issues that older folks are interested, but it doesn't touch that social function. It's really health focused. And that social function is very, very high. When Bob was talking about that, and I think Lynn mentioned it also, just that connectivity in some way, and as your world, when you're not going into the workforce, or we're not going out every day for something that really is work related, staying connected in some way is really, really important for a whole range of reasons, both health and quality of life. And so things that really get at the quality of life of older people, I think, is also really critical in terms of where folks would be interested. And I like the way you expressed it, meeting them where they are to access that is really important.
Stuart, you have any? Kill the mic, you ready to say anything else? Any other comments or questions? Yeah.
So I've heard a lot, especially something that you mentioned early on, that makes me think that a lot of new technology often needs is, pardon the pun, old-fashioned trust. And so there's a lot of trust building, both in, I'm hearing, trust building in not changing the interface, or at least changing it slowly and over time, being transparent. But also then the social trust of you trust the AARP, but you don't know who to trust when it comes to all these different apps, all these different things. And so I'm curious as to if anybody has any ideas on how to help build both trust, but also that social trust of, if I'm going to start a new company, I'm not going to have there's no social trust at all with a brand new company. And any ideas on how to kind of bring that social trust to new technologies?
Well, my suggestion on that is really branding. I don't see apps and different things marketed as, we care about your consumer protection. We care, and I don't know if those are the right words to use in terms of marketing that, but what you're really marketing to people is that you've thought about these things. Look at our privacy. We're going to tell you what we're doing with your data, and it's simple. Our privacy terms and conditions are 3 lines or 4 lines. They're not 5 pages with, hard to read. So I think some marketability there, that you're trying to differentiate yourself in the market as really caring about those things and sending that message out in a clear way. And then if you do that credibly, maybe a trusted brand like AARP would want to partner with you. Because I think brand is the way people develop trust, and often trusted brands will do that. But if you don't have the trusted brand, you really have to be a demonstrable, and you can do this on an incremental way, that you demonstrate credibility and reliability on one functionality, whether that's protecting privacy or whatever that is, that you sort of are developing your track record to attract those trusted brands to want to work with.
I think you're really hitting on a very good point there. I work in the engineering hardware industry, and I have very little trust in most of the companies I work with and most of the tools I use. And I mean, I'd have to really sleep on it to come up with a good list on that. But the first thing that comes to my mind is reliability. Older people are used to walking into a room and flipping on a light switch and the lights come on. But I don't trust my computer to work when I use it in the morning. Half the time it doesn't. And when we get into a car and we turn the key, the car starts. And it's got a lot of processors in these cars today. But again, when I'm on somebody's website, it may or may not work. I might fill in all the form, click submit, and it comes back and says you missed something. Go back and try it again, and then everything that I entered is empty, and I've got to re-enter all those fields again. And so my first impression is nobody's even tested this thing. But trust goes far beyond that. There's a lot of things, as you were saying just a minute ago, there's a whole impression you get when you work with technology. And sometimes the feeling is, well, they're just trying to get into my wallet. That's all this is about. And then sometimes the impression is, wow, somebody really thought this through. They're really trying hard here. And sometimes if you look back through a thread, you'll see, well, they started with Kickstarter. They've got a really neat product. Then Apple or Google bought them, and oh, well, trust is gone now. So there's a lot of components to trust, and older people, I think, might be seeing it differently than younger people.
Trust in our real lives, right, with people, we build trust based on behaviors over time. I think that's part of how we build trust. And so things like the words we say and how we say them to each other, the actions we take, our work product, all these things help build trust. And if we can take those kind of behaviors and what you're saying and implement them in our design decisions, in our development decisions, in the content that we're writing, really show that we are being transparent, really show that we have taken the time to care about our users enough to make sure that we've tested the usability of our sites, the functionality of our sites, then we can build trust a little bit at a time. It might not be able to come like a brand new product right out the bat, be able to have all the trust, but it's like a relationship. You tend to, a lot of people, I won't say you, but a lot of people tend to come to a relationship and they build that level of trust over time, and that's the same thing that happens with our products, I think.
Okay, one more question back here, and then we'll thank our panelists.
Well, it's not so much a question as a comment. I've been using computers for 35 years. Started out at a massive 64K. It was really a product to be proud of. Bill Godbout's S100 bus is what it was. What I have noticed, most particularly in the last few years, yes, I am a Mac nut, is the software. That's what the interface between my fingers and that damn machine has become very dicey. Mistakes are more easily made now than they've ever been before. Now, you take an older person who hasn't been around computers that long, and you're going to get some disappointment, some disillusion, and turning away. So in the course of designing what comes next, maybe it'd be a good idea to take a good look at how easily you can make a mistake.
Let's thank our panelists. Thank thank CHADEV for hosting, and we hope we have some good business ideas come out of this conversation today.
Thank you all for coming. Next week we have lightning talks, so I will be harassing you in the coming week for those. And thank you all for coming, and we hope to see you again soon. Thanks.
Great, thank you.